Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Veterans Workers' Party broadcast, which is part of our No to NATO series. I'm Mick Stott, the host, and I'm a member of the Workers' Party. And tonight we've got a group of veterans who are going to be sharing their perspectives on a number of veteran-related issues. So for hundreds of years now, the British Armed Forces has definitely been a model that's been revered across the globe. When I worked at the Military Academy Sandhurst, we were certainly the place to go if foreign countries wanted to train some of their officers at the highest standard. But I wonder what our country's thoughts are on our gallant service personnel. Well, we do have a number of people joining us tonight. We have Andrew Hudd, who is the Workers' Party deputy leader, and he is part of the senior service. So welcome, Andy. We also have Liam Lafferty, who is ex-Royal Signals. And we also have none other than himself, welcome Liam, and none other than himself, Warren, who is our ex-sniper. Welcome, Warren. And of course, the format that we're going to take tonight is going to be like a veterans round table, really. So we're just going to invite people to give their comments, and then we'll build up those comments as we go along. So can we start with an opener, maybe with you, Warren? What branch of the armed services did you sign up to, and why?
Well, it was a bit of a strange one, because all I wanted to do was drive a truck for a living. So I joined the Royal Corps Transport as a fresh-faced 18-year-old, and of course, did my passing out parade. I then got sent to RAF Leconfield to do my driver training up near Hull. And I got called into the commandant's office after 2 weeks, got marched in. I thought, what have I done? Because there were thousands of soldiers there. And he turned around and said, anybody who can shoot like you can, son's not driving a truck for a living. So they packed me off to learn to become a sniper.
Okay. And why did you join, Warren?
I joined, as I say, I didn't join to be part of the pretty much the armed services. I knew that getting a lorry license was super expensive, and the easiest way to do it was join the army and learn to drive trucks. So I did 2 weeks on the cars. I was what they do called a double top. I'd spent 2 weeks on Bedford TKs, and that was the last I ever saw of a lorry.
Wow, well, that's great. Okay, Andy, over to you. What was your reason for joining, and who did you join?
Well, it's a mixed reasons, really, and I've thought about it a lot in hindsight. But I was a Sea Cadet. They're still about, but I was in the Sea Cadets that kept me out of trouble off the streets when I was a young'un, and so I had the Royal Navy kind of bred into me at a very young age, and I like the discipline. I like the crack. I like what we've done. We've done all the sailing activities, hiking, and all that kind of stuff, and work around where I live was dire. You worked in a smelting works, you worked in the chemical works, or on the docks, and they didn't really appeal to me. So I thought, well, I'm never going to be able to travel around the world if I'm left here on my own devices. So I joined the Navy, and my dad said to me that. He tells a story that I came back from town one day, and he said I just came in and told him that I joined the Navy, but I remember it a bit differently, I'm sure. But I joined up to be a seaman, and they put me in the radar branch, and the rest is history.
Right, okay. And what about you, Liam?
A bit of a strange one for me as well. I had no intention of joining the army, really, but I didn't want to go to university. I thought 4 years of being skint would have been worse than starting work. So I was walking on the street, and it was back in the day where you had boys in uniform walk around and grab you and talk to you and chat you up. I was 17. Next minute, I'm in the careers office. It was a Royal Signal sergeant in there at the time. I don't recall his name either, I was joined as a communication systems engineer in the signals. And I was in for 13 years. I got out in 2020. That's no particular reason. But once I joined, you find reason. You become part of the institution as such, don't you? It quickly embraces you, and you quickly become it, even if you had no relative ambitions to join straight away. So.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? There's a common theme here because most of us didn't necessarily join to defend king and country or queen and country. And on some levels, the way the military was advertised then, it wouldn't have embraced that anyway. I personally joined because I was a martial artist. I did exceptionally well in the arena of martial arts and thought really the only way that I'm going to be able to afford to compete at the level that I competed at was to join the army and become a PT instructor. And of course, in the Army Physical Training Corps, there's no direct entry. You have to go and be a soldier first. So I was a sapper, a Royal Engineer, a combat engineer, actually. And of course, I think there's a little bit of commonality that none of us really necessarily wanted to go direct into conflict or do that job per se. So really interested in that. So let's continue. Did you ever... Let's throw this question to you first, Liam. Did you ever doubt that what you were doing during your service? Did you ever doubt that, and why? Tell us a little bit about that.
No, I'm a deep thinker. However, you realise yourselves your army careers go that fast, and it's that busy. You don't really have much time for reflection, even with the operations that you go on, and you don't really have time to think about the moral aspects, your personal convictions, what you see is right or wrong. You are part of the machine, essentially. Your peers think the same, and you end up thinking on this sort of a single mindset. As in, it wasn't until really I got out when I really started to open my eyes and really reflect. Did I skirt round the question there?
That's okay, Liam. And what about you, Warren? What are your thoughts on that? And by the way, just chip in anytime you like to add value to what we're talking about. So, Warren, what about you?
I found I absolutely loved it because when we started doing the basic training, I was a pretty good runner. So, of course, when we were doing the BFTs or the battle fitness training, we were running around. I ended up getting best recruit, best shot, and I was sort of made really because I was a bit of a footballer and I was a semi-pro cricketer for a while. So of course in the army, if you're good at sport, you're absolutely laughing. So I absolutely loved it. I loved all the drilling and everything else, and it was just learning new things. And the first time you ever shoot a weapon or you do an NBC drill, where obviously you get that tear gas in your throat for the first time. It's all a new experience, and I always used to love that idea of it, of just learning new things, really.
No, and that's cool, isn't it? What about you, Andy?
You get some. I don't know what it's like in the army, but in the Navy, when you go into a kind of a war zone or somewhere where there's a bit of conflict and you're there on kind of serious business, you get sent out information about what's happening and why we're there. And you used to get the kind of 2-3 pages of letters because I went to served for the former Yugoslavia when that was on in the 90s, and I was up and down the Adriatic every 6 months, which was a bit tedious, but the kind of information that you got out of there, it didn't kind of exactly ring true with me, some of it. And I think that and the after Iraq, again in the early 90s, I think some of the stuff that was coming out was I questioned a bit, but I think it was like Liam said, you pretty much keep your head down, don't you, and do what you got to do, and because everybody relies on everybody else, so anybody with any doubts is not a good fit into the team. But I certainly questioned it, but whether I done anything about it was a different matter.
No, and it is quite interesting because I think because I was so focused on my career, and I did a full career within the military. I did 30 years, and I started to question it when I was a casualty as part of a casualty reception cell, and we were getting real-time information from the front line, and of course we were also watching the mainstream media coverage of things. And so for me, that was one of the biggest question marks, as was Iraq. Why were we there? And when all of this stuff started really not to add up, I suppose that's when I started to question things. Because up until that time, I'd been so busy focusing on a full career and enjoying myself. I mean, in some ways, I've never had so much fun, but equally, I've never had so much pain. So it was a bit of a pain and pleasure experience, really. But there we go, eh? I
was just going to say, did you? What did you do about it at the time, or did you just keep it to yourself?
Well, you discussed it with others, but as I've found out, even if you talked about some of the things that are going on in the world now politically, I think the green machine in particular is such an indoctrinous environment that because we are very much a herd animal in our mentality, to speak out against the system would have probably made you a little bit questionable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And of course, most of the people that decided to speak up left. I got to a point where I left. So I resigned my commission in 2004 because of that, Andy. Yeah, because I started to question the whole system. None of it added up. And of course, I'd also created some other things that allowed me to leave for a reason, if you like, in the arena of mental health and things. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, we've all witnessed things within the military during our service. And I wonder if there's anything that you guys might have witnessed that again ended up being a bit of a showstopper, for you as an individual.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we were involved in the Falklands. So, as a fresh-faced 20-year-old, we were packed off to the Falklands. Very, very little warning that was going to happen. And of course, once we got down there, I was as nervous as hell travelling down there. I must admit, I was an absolute bundle of nerves. But once the boots touched the floor, I was perfectly fine. The training kicked in. But there were many, many soldiers that I saw, and something that I'll always take away from it was the amount of people who were very gung-ho, let's get down there and, give the RGs a bit of a pasting and everything else. And when their boots touched the ground, they suddenly started, being sick and actually vomiting and actually getting really, really scared, where I was the other way around. I was very nervous on the way down. And once my boots touched the ground, it was like, it became almost like, right, this is the real business. If you don't switch on, there's an old army saying, as Liam would know, you switch on, and if you don't switch on, then you're in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't switch on, somebody switches you off. Yeah. What about you guys, Andy and Liam? What, have you got anything to add to that?
Oh, well, I'll let Liam go first. Mine's inglorious.
Yeah, mine's inglorious as well. I was signals. I worked behind the scenes supporting. But in theatre, it's every conflict's different. The Falklands is you can't really put it in the same parallels of Iraq and Afghanistan. They're two totally different conflicts. The same with how kinetic it would be in Ukraine compared to Afghanistan, and then it's separate from that to Iraq. Nothing that I'd seen. I did nothing that I can really say, but nothing that I know at the time, and shamefully admit that I would have completely turned a blind eye to. I wouldn't allow my personal morals to rise to the top. I just got on with the job, really. It's mostly the way that soldiers, you have to get into that mindset, the way soldiers talk about the people whose country you're in, how that comes. That's quite a difficult thing to hear, but you don't think about it at the time. You reflect on it and you go, right, there's a slight bit of dehumanisation here, and where that comes from. And that was something that I thought was quite prevalent. Not with everybody, a few, but people jumped on the bandwagon. Some of the terms you use, terms like in Afghanistan, like chogi and things like that, like just stuff that just wouldn't really pass now, and the way I look at the world.
Yeah, what about you, Andy?
Oh, well, like I said, I did do 3 tours in the former Yugoslavia. I got a medal for it. Not really sure why, because I think the closest I got to action was burning my hand on the flight deck barbecue. When I was on a high value unit, so I was on a carrier. So we were 60 miles away from any kind of thing, but we were there, well, supposedly on peacekeeping duties, and we were miles away from stuff, and any action was reported by ships that are closer to land and any action there. But pretty much when you've got that kind of role in that type of theatre and you've got the weapons you're pretty much, well, in the Navy anyway, and it's probably one of the reasons why I joined. You don't get that close to the action. You are in, by the sense, very, very far away. Apart from, and like Warren said, the boys who went down in the Falklands. I was hearing stories from them when I joined in 1990. I was hearing stories of the Falklands, and I know that was horrific for the Navy. Design the ships and the what they were composed of and how they were constituted. The ships would, the structures would melt and people getting burnt and horrific way to die, and it was horrific what they'd seen. But I think that proved. That led to a generation of changes within the Navy that kind of made ships a bit safer. And recent conflicts, I don't think we've been that involved. It's been kind of a different theatre of a war, really.
And it's interesting because the Falklands conflict, that was the thing that changed pretty much all of our preparation for war. Yeah. It changed the equipment we were issued. So the military, I mean, when I first joined, I don't know what it was like when you joined, but it wasn't that dissimilar. But if you looked at the webbing we carried then, the 33 webbing, it was unbelievable, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was completely useless for the task, I've got to say. I pretty much adapted my own webbing, and we were pretty much allowed to do that as well, to be fair. But the webbing you were issued was completely hopeless for the task you were trying to carry out. Yeah. And I've got to say, as soon as we landed, I mean, the backpack, literally your Bergen, you were, there was quite a lot came out of that didn't go back in it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that 33 pack webbing, which is what we wore when I first joined, used to double its weight if it rained.
Yes, exactly that.
It was a real sense of humour test, absolutely. And of course, we've all witnessed different things as part of our service. And, it's interesting, Andy, because sometimes we think that just because we're not right on the, the forward edge of the battle line, that it's only going to be those kind of people that are influenced. But in reality, quite the opposite is true. And certainly with the work that I've done, that comes to the fore all the time. I mean, as you think about when we've gone into conflicts and the arenas that we've gone into, and you look at the support mechanisms that either are or are not in place, what's your take on that, guys? What are the support mechanisms like, as far as you're concerned, for our ex-serving personnel?
Oh, Christ. I don't think, well, like I said, I gave an example of speaking to veterans of the Falklands War, and, they were still serving. Do I think that they received the kind of, at least, guide to or support with regards to their mental health afterwards? No, I don't, not at all. These were guys that were reliving the moment, and you could tell that they'd been to war, and I think that's one of the failures. I hope it's changed. I mean, I don't know now, but I hope it's changed. Right. Well, there you are. So, I mean, I think the mental health issue is a big one. Once that starts, you see people who leave the service, and then they're no longer in an institution and they've got nowhere to go. They find it difficult to relate to people. I say they're suffering with mental health issues, so it's difficult to get a job, hold down a relationship, and you can see it all the time. And I don't think, well, you're telling me the support isn't there, and that's sad to hear, because this has been a long story. This is not a new thing. This is a long held. We've seen it for a long time, and it's sad that that's not the case now.
No, and when I mean the support, there are support mechanisms. I mean, it might surprise people to think that, or to know that there's over 1,000 agencies that help veterans, and they're all created by veterans, Andy, which I think is wrong, to be honest. Yeah. What about you guys, Liam and Warren? What's your take on the support mechanisms?
Yeah, yeah, why is it always left up to charities? That's a thing you're right about, Mick. Why is it charities are led by veterans, people who have came out the other side of these horrible experiences, and when they've not properly acclimatised to civil life? Like, I'll speak for myself. I had trouble acclimatising back into Civil Street. Mainly I thought it would be easy. I left in the middle of lockdown. Pretty daft. But yeah, I sought a little bit of support, and it was terrific. Like you said, it was private. There was inside the military. It's I think they try and reduce the stigma, but what's good is a PowerPoint presentation when there should be real support out there. They get good characters within the military trained up to good levels of therapy and those qualifications that like the civilians have get brought in to help us when the army's failed.
Yeah.
So what about you?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the first time I took a life, I felt it was a very strange thing. I felt shamed. That sounds absolutely crazy, but I literally, and the only way I could get through it was look at the guys around me and think, if I don't get rid of the opposition that's in front of me, they're going to kill all my friends that are around me, and that sort of centered me and gave me something to hold on to. Because the first time you take a life, your heart's pounding, and of course you're looking through a scope, so they're not miles away; they're right in front of you. And of course they're just a kid, and some Argentinian conscript or some kid or whatever. They've got a life themselves too. So the first time you're very conflicted. And I felt ashamed and slightly sick. And then I spoke to many, and I was okay once I'd sort of got it into my head that, if I didn't do that, these people around me were going to die, and that it would be the same thing. And that would be more shameful if that sounds crazy. But the thing that really annoyed me, I think, was I still speak to people who were part of that conflict, who pulled sailors out of the water, who, especially off the Galahad and stuff like that, where they were so badly burned. And when they went to get help, so let me walk you through very simply what happened was I took this guy in to get some help. He went to the doctors. I went with him because he didn't really want to go on his own because he still felt fairly shameful at having taken lives as well. And we went with him to the doctor. The doctor then referred him. He had to go to the Citizens Advice Bureau. The Citizens Advice Bureau put him in touch with the British Legion. British Legion then got in touch with him. Then turned around and said that they could get a psychiatrist or somebody purporting to be a psychiatrist to have a chat with him. He had to have a chat with an army veteran first. And all of these things where he needed help right there. And he was only able to get like a 45-minute interview. Well, this guy needed a lot more help than that. And it took ages for him to get that interview. It took something like nigh on 2.5 months for him to be able to talk to somebody. And for somebody who's been in battle for their country, for me, that is utterly unacceptable.
Yeah, and of course, Warren, that's my specialism. So mental health is something that I specialised in. That's one of the reasons that I resigned my commission as well. I realised that the old tenet that we were breaking them down and then building them back up, I didn't see the building them back up bit. And in fact, we were letting people go that I felt were too broken to make it outside of the military machine. And there was no transition either. So there was no decommissioning of the soldier. And of course, in a battlefield situation, as you rightly said, Warren, you don't fight for king and country. You're fighting for the man to the left and the right of you, whether that's male or female, normally male. And so that's all that matters to you in that moment. And of course, for commanders, it can also be a situation where they fear not bringing someone back.
Yes.
This is one of the guilt trips that some of these commanders go on as well. And of course, anyone that doesn't feel emotion, it would worry me anyway, because there's a good chance they might be some sort of psychopath on some levels. And I'm pretty convinced I've met a few.
Well, here's the thing, Michael, that I found when I got out, as Liam was just saying, I literally, when I got out, I sat in a chair. I went to a hotel in London to start with, and I sat in a chair almost waiting for somebody to tell me it was lunchtime or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't move. I needed an order to sort of do that. So I'd been well and truly institutionalized. But the way I sort of dealt with it then was I then went and helped people look after aid workers in war-torn countries, almost as though I was trying to justify what I'd done. Does that sound crazy?
No, that sounds right.
And I put myself in Sierra Leone and places like that. I put myself in all sorts of danger that I really shouldn't have done. Trying to sort of strangely make amends for 8 years. It was in going to different war-torn countries and looking after the aid workers in sometimes some fairly hairy situations.
Well, and the thing is, Warren, if you look at the average person, if we're going to go into very high-pressure environments, what happens slowly but surely is you become your environment. And if we're not careful, we can become so desensitized to our environment that we experience what Viktor Frankl would say is an emotional death on some levels. And then, of course, what I see service personnel that put themselves back in dangerous environments because it's the only place in which they feel alive and useful. That makes sense. But, of course, by that point, we've sort of passed over a threshold, really. I mean, I wonder, as we talk about that, I could talk about the mental health element all night. I'm certainly not going to do that because I've helped thousands of veterans recover from post-traumatic stress disorder. I've never believed it's for life. I've never trusted the models that are used out there because for complex trauma, they never worked and still are not working. And that's not me saying that. Anyone that follows research would soon know that. But would you say that if you think about Britain as a country, would you say that we've been involved in any unjust wars? And if so, which ones would you point out?
Iraq.
Yeah.
Where should we start? Yeah.
Yeah. Like what we were saying before, but I think you should always have doubt. You should never really stick by your convictions. I was when I read the topics, I was thinking, is our last ever just war possibly the Falklands, or is it? Like, you don't know. And after hearing Warren speak, it puts a doubt in your head because I was never in the Falklands. I've only spoke to a couple of men who were, but they tend to say the same thing. Unjust wars, plenty. Just very hard to find.
No, and of course, some people might. I have a great challenge with misplaced loyalty, which I'll talk about in a moment, because I believe some of it is misplaced loyalty. I think that the whole structure of war is a very interesting concept. What about you? What about you guys, Warren and Andy? What's your take on that?
I think that. I mean, my views have changed. When I left the military, and you get to think for yourself. And you can read books that probably won't get taken off you from your locker. Anyway, I developed a different view, and I don't think I don't think there is a need for war, of course, and I do question whether there is ever a just war. But in the Workers' Party, we believe in self-defense. We believe the right to protect our own country and to defend our sovereignty. And I think ultimately, for me, that would be the just war. And I think Liam's right. The Falklands comes as close to that as you can get, really. But I know there's other geopolitical stuff going on behind that. But that was certainly the closest you can get. And I don't think Great Britain has ever covered itself in an awful amount of glory in its empirical past. So I don't think, I struggle to think of another version apart from the Falklands.
Yeah, exactly that. I thought the Falklands, I was perfectly okay with it. As far as we were concerned, we were defending sovereign territory, even though, it's a bunch of rocks and a load of sheep. And what we used to call bennies, the farmers with the hats on and everything. Yeah. But it was, when I started realising we were really unjust, was when I started protecting aid workers in war-torn countries, because you get to meet embassy staff and military attachés, of course, or embassy attachés who are nothing of the sort. And they're there to look after Britain's interests and everything else. And I was staggered by the amount of involvement from the Americans, from Israel, from the Germans, from the French, and from us, Britain, interfering in other people's wars and backing people who were getting and people, you were seeing sides getting slaughtered. And the one thing that always comes out, you always know who the bad guys are because they start doing the war crimes almost straight away. And it's when you see that and you sort of go, look, I saw them do this. And you see the British military attaché or whatever he might be, the embassy liaison or whatever, turn around and go, oh, yes, but they're doing this, and it's right in front of you. And you are just turning a complete blind eye. And that was when the penny dropped for me.
Yeah, and of course, but my tack is really simple with this. The only lawful, and I use the term lawful conflict or war, is when you're actually defending your sovereign turf. So as we say in the party, it is okay to defend yourself. But if you actually look at the Terrorism Act of 2001, if you take a look at that, it defines what terrorism is. And if you look at every conflict that we have participated in, including the Second World War, because it was in Europe that we went to, that involves a regime change, that's an act of terrorism because we're using acts of violence in order to create that regime change. And so for me, it was really quite simple. Are we defending sovereign turf? The Falklands, you could argue, was the only lawful conflict because it was deemed to be sovereign turf. But let's face it, we didn't own it in the first place, did we?
No.
And so I have a great challenge morally with war as well. It's almost like gamekeeper. Originally you were poacher, but now you're the gamekeeper. So it's poacher turned gamekeeper, isn't it? That sort of mentality. But my greatest challenge is how the people that create wars, as far as I'm concerned, are the ones who benefit from them. And of course, they're the ones who fund them. So when we look at the current money laundering operation that's going on in the Ukraine, it's pretty obvious the people that are going to benefit from all of that. And no surprises when you follow the money. It's going to involve BlackRock, Vanguard. It's going to involve all the same names. And this is where all the wealth is being funneled at this moment in time. Because those are and I suppose the only reason that we are aware of that is because we have access to social media.
Yeah.
If you look at Iraq, we wouldn't have had the same coverage in Iraq.
Yeah.
And of course, now that we have that war, you can't hide, because ultimately you're getting footage from these individual countries that aren't completely blanket banned by their own country at the level of blocking social media stuff. But yeah, so I have a great challenge with it ethically and morally. If you look at what's going on in Israel right now, how it's just been rationalised and made sense of, when in reality it's nothing but terrorism from on Israel's part. I still can't get my head around how people could ignore what went before October, as if October was a justification for one good turn deserves another good turn, and one bad turn deserves another bad turn. So yeah, it's a little bit sort of touches me a little bit that.
Like you said.
Sorry, Liam.
Sorry, and like you say, Mick, with the amount of money that's been invested in Ukraine and by these people whose invested interests, they can't back out now. They can't back out. It's up to people like us and the small people to start these discussions and talk about it, so they can't ignore us anymore. But I also think a huge portion of the population are ignorant of the situation, or maybe have an idea of what's going on, but chose to ignore it, and because they think it will pass, and it's just another warmongering, fear-mongering sort of thing. It will never happen, but we are very close, and there needs to be some diplomacy before we all end up in a pile of nuclear dust.
I think the thing with it is there's only three types of people win a war. That's arms dealers, politicians, and bankers.
Yeah.
Everybody else either suffers physically or suffers economically.
And insurance companies, Warren. Insurance companies.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the thing that really gets me with this is I would be ashamed today to be in the military to say that we were doing flights out of Akrotiri Air Base to allow the Israelis to target refugee camps where there are men, women and children, civilians dying. I don't care which side you support. If you kill a civilian, a man, a woman or a child, you're a war criminal. I don't care if you stand, and there is no flag that you can stand under, whether it be Israel, United States, UK, any flag you can stand under that justifies that.
And you know, Warren, I've sat individually with at least 6,000, with over 6,000 people individually at the level of getting rid of trauma. And the one thing that I can guarantee is the lads that struggle with it terribly are the ones that have ended up being involved in incidents that have killed women and children. It's almost like we can rationalise fighting men on men. But the moment women and children are involved, the impact is significantly greater.
I was just see, like, when I was thinking, there's problems at the moment. I mean, we've heard that the Starmer wants to do or banding around the idea of conscription and stuff like that, and you just think, well, if they had an army that was or an armed forces that were, not part of any kind of armed group like NATO, and if they were there knowing that they were going to be defending their country, their sovereignty, and their own interests, I'm pretty sure you'll get a lot more volunteers, right? And you're just thinking, well, if you just look at the government, you just think, well, play it with a straight bat. Stop meddling in people's affairs. Stop, meddling in NATO and poking Russia with a stick. Just look after our own interests, and then you'll have a military that we're proud to serve. And you mentioned about Israel and stuff like that, and our involvement in that. I'm pretty sure. I know we had a conversation about it earlier about our individual thoughts, but I'm pretty sure that there'll be a lot of disquiet, for those serving peace personnel over there. I'm pretty sure of that. Like I said, I had my thoughts, and I remember in the mess deck as well. When I was serving, you get a bit of downtime, and you're sat there chatting with a dozen other men, and you get to talk about it, and you do get to question it. Whether you do anything about it, well, that's something different. That's a different kettle of fish. But I'm sure there's disquiet about it and unease about it. And I think another thing is like, and I remember vividly, there were certain things I was not proud of in the Navy, as in, our uniform wasn't that great. It fell apart in a bit of heat, and the waterproof jackets let the rain in, and all this kind of stuff. And we were always kind of not second fiddle. Well, we were really highly trained, but the equipment we had was garbage, and like, you just kind of felt let down. And I think it's a series of letdowns, wasn't it?
Andy, I remember when a couple of my friends' sons who were serving that went out to the Gulf and Iraq because they said that they were going to use NBC type weapons. We were sending equipment out to some of our friends' sons because they didn't have the kit.
Yeah.
And so, but does that surprise us? Because at the end of the day, as we look at this concept of who gains from war, who reports on it? And when the people that own the war machine own the mainstream media, it's no surprise that the likes of George will never appear on the mainstream TV speaking the truth about Zionism and who is leading the charge with regards to everything that's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, the press is unhinged. I have conversations, especially because everyone's aware of what's going on in Palestine, and everyone should be acutely aware, even if you don't follow the socials. It always pops up in your feed. But the press is. There was a brief moment a couple of weeks ago when the press it was unable to hide it anymore. There's a few headlines that sort of all the same day in all the papers. Even the Daily Mail had it, and then it was gone again. However, when I speak about Ukraine to my friends and stuff, and they go, "Oh, well, Ukraine's just," and I was like, "If they're lying to you about one, they're going to be lying to you about the other one." And it's So that's how I see it. The press is unhinged at the minute, and they're all following the same line. Independent media has been a save, like you say, the information age. The information's out there. They can't hide it anymore. So what do they do?
No.
They discredit, the slander, they'll push lawsuits on people. Like you say, George never gets airtime.
Just on that,
of course, Liam, I think it was Mark Twain that said it's much easier to fool someone than it is to tell them that or convince them that they've been fooled. And of course, I think as you wake up in the military, you start to realise, and Iraq was a perfect example of it with the war criminal that was Blur, who coincidentally is at the helm at the moment when it comes to digital ID. And of course, this is the future trap, because what I see slowly but surely is a ratcheting of control and power from a Labour Party perspective, which is all planned. There's no way you can tell me that these people do not know what they are doing at the level of taxation and how they have to destroy the middle class. For me, wokeism is Marxism. There's no doubt about that in my world.
Yeah. Just another label, isn't it?
Just on the information thing, because that's interesting as well. I said about when I'd done the former Yugoslavia, which is when I look back on it, is the balkanization of former parts of the Soviet Union, and anyway, that's a different show probably. But the page of A4, or 2 sides of A4, telling me why I was there and why it was a good thing to go down. I ain't going to cut the mustard anymore. Our serving personnel, Navy, Army, whatever, have got access to a lot of information, and I think if and I'm sure they are, but if they're cognizant enough that they kind of actually take in the breadth of views and actually arrive at a position themselves, they'll pretty much find that position is that actually they can be critical of a lot of the stuff we've been doing as a country over decades, and surely that has got to materialise at some point, right? Because we're seeing it materialise in current day-to-day politics. People aren't believing the nonsense that comes out of the government anymore.
No.
And
you only need to look at the way that the pro-Palestinian group have been turned into terrorists. If for somebody to have to do that, you must know that there's a huge wave of support going in the wrong direction.
Palestine Action,
Palestine Action, absolutely. If for them to have to do that, you now know that the momentum of something is going against the mainstream narrative, essentially.
Yeah, they
irony.
They can't.
I think there is something I would like to say on that when you're talking about the mainstream narrative, and it's the amount of British people who've got killed because of the mainstream narrative. Now, you had Liz Truss turning around and saying, everybody should go and fight for Ukraine and this, that and the other. So you had these guys who've got no business being on the front line of a war, putting down their call of duty, signing up and rushing out onto the battlefield, maybe have mental health issues anyway, rushing out onto the battlefield with 2 weeks training. Now, an incident happened in Ukraine where Liz Truss said everybody should go and fight. 35 people turned up at a base just inside the border of Poland, literally with their mobile phones still on. And of course, the Russians went, there we go, 35 foreign numbers. Let's send a couple of rockets in there. They didn't even have the basic skills to know to shut off electronic devices so that they couldn't be tracked. You get mercenaries going over, posting on Facebook the restaurant they're eating in with other mercenaries. I mean, these people have no business being in a war. The war is not a game for amateurs.
No, and to be fair, Warren, if you look at even that in its essence, how long does it take to train a soldier? Just because you pass basic training, which is infinitely longer than a couple of weeks, you're really just a new boy on the block.
I kid you not, Michael. I was shooting 500 rounds a day for 2 years before I went into a war.
Yeah. Well, they say you haven't done anything until you've done it for 2 years, Warren. You start until you've done it for 2 years. And, when people say to me about some of these fighting age men that are coming across, there doesn't appear to be a reason why we've got fighting age men coming across, and they say there must be a foreign army. I said, well, actually, you clearly don't understand what it takes to train an army. But equally, these people could be more dangerous untrained.
Yes, yeah, I think. And the other thing I wanted to say, I wanted to touch on a point that Andy made about the where you get the propaganda and everything else, and you hear this propaganda coming out from people like Hamish de Bretton Gordon and people like I think it's Richard Kemp, these former officers in the British Army who don't have the first idea. They're in the pocket of the military-industrial complex. When they come over and train the Ukrainians in the UK. The UK forces are asking them what it's like to be in a drone war. So we're talking about boots on the ground, but it would be absolutely crazy. So the first thing to say is 73,000 British armed forces in the battle for Bakhmut. Ukraine lost 120,000 men in 8 months.
Yeah.
Now, very, very simply here, here's the thing that really gets me. You don't know the topography, okay? You don't know the language. You've never fought in a drone war in your life, and you haven't been and Britain haven't been in trenches for 80 years.
Yeah.
How long do you think you're going to survive on that battlefield? It's absolute lunacy that what is coming out from these people.
And you're talking about
what were you going to say, Andy?
Oh no, it's just on another point about the Truss and comments over conscription and stuff like that. I mean, if we had MPs that in the full knowledge that if they ask for people to send people to war, that they send their own children as well. I'm pretty sure we won't ever vote for war, which ain't a bad thing for me. And going back to the earlier point, if we had a country worth fighting for, that is to know that not in the state it is something we're reindustrialized, rejig the economy, make it proud of itself, give it some pride and some I think people will have that, and they know that if they're ever going to get called to war, that it's going to be a just war in defence of their own sovereignty and own country. I'm pretty sure they'll quite happily join. And I think our politicians are too free and easy with the lives of other people.
Wow.
And as a part of that kind of global madness that we're all seeing now.
Yeah, absolutely.
People will die for Putin. People will die for Putin, guys, because he's seen as a spiritual leader and he's seen as the just leader as well as a political one. Nobody's going to go and fight for Merz or Starmer or Macron. It's absolutely... I mean, I don't know how Liam feels. Liam, would you go and fight for any of those three?
Not a chance. It's like you say, you hear them speak, just how they speak. It's the like Starmer and UK politicians, they say the same lines over and over again. It's like it's rehearsed. You never see them speak freely, or it's not how you need to be inspired to fight. Like what Andy was saying, soldiers need inspiration to fight, and if you don't have that, you're not going to have a good fighting force. And over there, you've got, I believe they had some manning issues at the start, Russia, but it seems to me they're recruiting quite freely without the need for mobilisation for volunteers, and I think they see this as their existential moment on stage. And if you've got motivated soldiers, there's nothing harder to fight against.
Well, Liam, you've made sorry, Michael. I just want to say that Liam's made an excellent point there, because there's 30,000 Russians volunteering every month. Now, just take that into account for a minute. Inside 3 months, they get more volunteers than we've got in the whole of the British Army.
Yep. And as you said, Warren, how much of this war is remote killing? Because drone wars are remote killing. They're remote killing. You know
what this is? This is laser targeting artillery. That's what drone warfare is.
Yep. Yeah.
This 3-to-1 nonsense that was first put up, where you need 3 attackers for 1 defender. Well, that was put up by a guy who'd never seen a battle in his life. It was in 1991. This guy in a university came up with that, and everybody says that drone warfare changed that completely. You hide in a bunker, they can fly a drone straight in there and kill all of you in one go.
Absolutely. And of course, it's a different war fighting, and they know that as well. I mean, no one can tell me that these people don't know what they're doing at the level of what I believe when we look at the potential for conscription in the UK. That's just another fear tactic. It's another smokescreen. For me, where we're going in the UK is digital ID and central digital banking currency. It is nothing less than technocracy. And if anyone really wants to understand all the steps and follow that, just take a look at Boris Johnson's speech to the UN in 2019. He is telling you everything that has unfolded since COVID started. It's all there. It's all in that, in his presentation, his address to the UN.
And not only that, I would turn around to you, gentlemen, and say, go and have a look literally at the RAND corporations extending Russia policy paper from 2019. Everything that is in that policy paper is literally laid out in that policy paper from 2019 to upset the Russians. In other words, to make them move out of Syria, which is exactly what did happen, to extend them banking-wise. That went completely by the by. And, of course, the oil and everything else. But Ukraine were never meant to win this war. They were there to antagonise and basically be used as cannon fodder against the Russians to literally deflect them from doing anything else, anywhere else. And, of course, the Americans have now managed to destabilise Syria, which is exactly what they wanted. And, of course, many people are dying for no good reason. And this is another thing that I saw when I was looking after aid workers in these foreign countries. Is you would see the big conglomerates and the big corporations and the big countries come in and get people killed in these wars just because they wanted regime change.
And just as a final question and a final take on this, I wonder, should we go to conscription? And if not, why not?
I think Liam put it well. With regards to the but. If you've got people who believe, you'll come back and correct me in a minute, but if you've got people in the armed forces that believe what they're doing, that's so hard to fight against. And I think, there's conscription. I don't think will ever come in because it'll never work in this country. That people are so downtrodden with it, right? We're looking at a youth that have got no jobs. So the 18 to 24s, there's no work out there for them, or it's really difficult for them to get a job. It's really difficult for them to get a house. The minimum wage is not enough to subsist on. What we're saying is that the original kind of agreement, if you like, with the government was that you would have. You would have certain things guaranteed. You'd be able to go to work. You'd be able to earn a wage that you'd be able to keep your family, and you'd be able to, you'd have a roof over your head, and you'd have water, heating, and all the kind of basics of life, and maybe a holiday a year. That was your contract with the government. That if you went to work, that you'd done that. And there's no contract with the government anymore. People are let down left, right, and centre, and you'll get. I think even I considered myself as an economic conscript, back in the day. You might get people that are so desperate that they'll join the armed forces, but they won't be there to fight. They're there to get out of an economic hole. So along with kind of redressing the contract with working people, I think you've got to give them a country that they're going to be proud in, and a country that they feel that is worth defending. At the moment, I don't see where that is. I mean, we want to create it, of course we do. But at the moment, it's not there, and I think the problem with the armed forces and why. I mean, a pal of mine, he works on the MOD, but anyway, he was saying that they're struggling to get recruits. They're losing 5,000 people every year.
Yes.
And you just think that, and there's a deficit, and they're just not recruiting enough just to keep it at the numbers it is at the moment. So. How do you incentivize people like that? Well, you make sure that there's decent provision of the support services that you mentioned, Mick. You make sure that there's a decent salary, a decent pension in the armed forces, that you've actually got something to fight for, that you're fighting the good fight, and you've got a country to come back to that's worth, defending and fighting for. And that goes...
As opposed to a country, Andy, that when you return from Iraq, want to investigate it, like the IHAT investigations, like the Good Friday Agreement, that now has been reopened so that veterans can be charged. And I don't think that's by chance anyway. If you look at the communist mentality, there can't be any other heroes other than the main people. So that doesn't surprise me on any level. Final thoughts maybe from you guys, from Warren and Liam. Final thoughts on conscription.
I'll let Liam go first.
I don't think it would work here. However, I have got niggles of doubt that they'll pull something out of the hat. like it was. If we think back to Iraq, I was quite young at the time, but my family was vehemently opposed to it. I told me the whole spiel. I was only a teenager at the time. So, but the way the press, after the anti-war movement at the start, and then the way the press sort of rallied around the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan became less of a negative thing. You just can't trust what the press are going to do or what the government's going to do or what they're going to tell you. Conscription, would it work here? No, I don't think so at all. I don't think this generation, the information age, too much information out there. No one's got the loyalties they did back in your granddad's day and so on and so forth. So, no, I don't think it would work. I'm against it. I'm not opposed to voluntary national service, but not in a time of warmongering. I think it can be a good thing, especially when people are out of work. It taught me a lot. Well, not I didn't do national service, but the army taught me a lot. It becomes you. It helps you grow up. Teaches you a little bit of discipline, a little bit of way out of your life. But then when you come back out, it's a completely different story. But yeah, I don't think this generation could be conscripted.
I think you're absolutely right. I agree with all these gentlemen that conscription doesn't work. And we can see that in Ukraine, okay? Everybody's giving it the big one about Ukraine, Slava Ukraine, and all the rest of it. They are beating people up and throwing them into vans to go on the front line. That's their idea of conscription. Yeah. And there are videos every single day that you can see of this happening. But they're now conscripting people who are over 60 years of age, 2 weeks of training, and they're throwing them onto the front lines to die here. So conscription is absolutely useless. The army doesn't want them because half the people, as you can see in Ukraine, are either running away or surrendering or going AWOL or whatever, and just throwing themselves into the River Tisa and drowning in the River Tisa, trying to swim it to get to Poland to get away from being conscripted. So conscription doesn't work. And the other thing that you need to impress upon people as well, you are going to go into a freezing cold trench every single moment of the time. Anybody who's ever been under artillery fire, the first time you come under artillery fire is horrible. The very ground shakes, and you're wondering if your number's on that one. When the rounds are cracking over your head, it sounds like a whip going off, like a whip crack. And when you're under fire and you're under that sort of stuff, and there's rockets and flares flying through the air, and there's tracer flying through the air, you suddenly realise that this was a bad idea. So I think conscription is a real bad thing. And how can I put this? An army is for professional soldiers. It is not for amateurs who are thrown in there or just told, go and do this. Conscription doesn't work, and it absolutely should be no to conscription across the board without any shadow of a doubt for me.
Yeah, well, they do say that one volunteer is worth 10 pressed men, and that certainly plays out when we're under pressure, right? So I'd like to thank Andy, Liam and Warren for coming on the programme tonight as veterans. It's always interesting to get a veteran take on it because it's generally grassroots. And, of course, I think our politicians have forgotten or have never even sampled what it's like to be grassroots. As Andy said, if their children were going to be at the front of some of these battles, I don't think there would be many wars, but there we go. I always say follow the money. If you really want to know who funds war, how war is created, how it's presented in terms of its marketing by the mainstream media, just take a look at who stands to gain from it financially, and you won't be surprised. So thank you, guys, and I have no doubt we'll be having another programme in the not-too-distant future. Thanks for being there tonight.
Thank you.
Cheers, Nick. Lovely to see you.
So there we go. That's another programme and a great chat with some of our veterans. As I said before, just to wrap up, you don't really know what something's like until you've been in it. And, of course, imagination and the reality and imagination compared to your expectations aligned with those are always going to be, there's going to be differences in those. There's nothing more sobering rather, than someone actually telling you that to fill your last will and testament out, and when you get issued your dog tags and you get told you're going into a certain zone, and there's a good chance you might not come back. That's a very sobering thought. And at that point, it makes you reevaluate what's important to you. And of course, until people experience that, they are in the world of imagination, and they couldn't possibly even get their head around what it's like to live in a field for a period of time under the concept of being under threat. And of course, everything that you stand for being completely turned upside down. So I thank everyone for listening in tonight, and I hope you're going to join us on the next one. We've certainly got more lined up, so I look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you.